Welcome, my friends, to Pop Culture Fridays. I'm your host, as always, Troy. This week, 8.5 Explained. It's Federico Fellini's 1963 masterpiece that's on most people's top 10 lists for best films of all time. I guess it depends on who you talk to. What I'm going to do this episode is I'm going to talk about what the film is about, the sort of like the standard idea that everyone has. And then, of course, when I was watching this, it just developed naturally. I didn't try to do this or anything, but I have my own kooky little theory about what this movie could also be about. I don't think anybody else is talking about this, so you're going to want to hear this. So Federico Fellini's film 8.5 is about the film director Guido Anselmi, who struggles with creativity as he attempts to make his brand new movie. Overwhelmed by his work and personal life, the director retreats into his thoughts, which often focus on his loves, both past and present, and frequently he wanders into fantasy. As he tries to sort out his many entanglements, romantic and otherwise, Guido finds his production becoming more and more autobiographical. Now, this film has been said that it's about Fellini himself, about the pressures of being a film director, about the pressures of having other people who are constantly trying to get your attention or ride your coattails, so to speak, and the pressure to come up with a new work when you've already established yourself as a great filmmaker. Terry Gilliam, if you have Criterion Collection, this Terry Gilliam couple-minute feature has a lot of interviews with people and their take on this movie, 8.5. And one of them, Terry Gilliam, the famous Monty Python animator, said that 8.5 is the film that actually captures what it's like to be a film director, to make a movie. There's also interesting interviews with Paul Feig and lots of other people. And, the standard definition is that it is about a film director who has to deal with all these pressures. But when I was watching the opening scene, which I think captures everything, not just maybe even for this movie, but also anyone as a person who's had to deal with pressure or this idea that you're trapped in something or that you've got to up yourself or make something better than what you've made it before. Something came about in me in this first scene, and it's this. I think it's entirely possible that this film, although it is, I think, about a film director and all the pressures that are associated with that, I think there's a parallel story here that's being told. I'm not necessarily saying that Fellini is telling it, but it's something that could be interpreted as this, and I think it's the sort of the responsibilities of an empire. Like, you're seeing a film director who has all these pressures, is a person of higher authority or represents higher authority, and you could make the same argument for an empire, and I think he's doing that. The reason I think he's doing it is because I think he makes a couple of references to America when he's in these moments, or the characters are in these moments of telling the story of the rise and the burden of responsibility and then the fall, the same things that a director might experience. I have no idea. But I think these are similar things that an empire experiences. So that's my theory. And let me give you 4 examples of why I think that. So in the opening scene, what you have is, it's so brilliant, this opening scene. You have Guido, it's a dream, it's a fantasy, and he's in his car, and it looks like it's on fire or something, and everyone around him in this traffic jam, it's a traffic jam, nobody's moving, everyone's staring at him, just staring at him. You get the sense that what you're looking at is someone who's being stared at by the world, by the public. All these people represent the people of the world or the nations of the world. To me, they did. And the reason that I think that is because he's struggling to get out of his car. He wants to be free of this traffic jam. He wants to be free of this burden of overpopulation and sort of huddled masses surrounding him. Everywhere he goes, it's gridlock. And what he does is he finally gets out of the car and he sort of floats down the street above everyone else, and then eventually he ascends into the sky. Now, right away, the thing that made me think about America was that he's wearing this very subtle hat that is almost unmistakably a cowboy hat. It's very subtle, it's very small. Let's say it's more of like a 4-gallon hat. And he's wearing it. I think it's clear as day that he is wearing a cowboy hat. But the idea kicked in for me, especially when he, here he was, just like and I don't think this movie is about America. What I'm saying is that I think he's using America and a film director as a comp. I shouldn't even say he's using. I'm just saying that my interpretation could be taken as someone who's using the story of a film director, or the pressures of a film director, to tell stories about an empire's trajectory or downfall. And he's telling that story a little bit through America, because it's, in 1963, it's the time of America in the Cold War, the maybe not the only superpower, but certainly maybe the superpower. And what happens is, after he floats away and floats up into the sky, which I think represents him getting away from Europe, coming to the New World, what they think is the New World, it's not the New World, it's new to them, and then ascending into the sky and sort of reaching a different level of consciousness, or a different level of government, or whatever it is, something that hadn't been experienced before in the West traditionally. What happens next in the dream is he's being flown like a kite, like he's in the sky, but he's got a rope around his foot, and there's somebody on the ground pulling him. And finally they pull him down to reality, down to the earth, where empires always crumble. And to me, that was just like in a 3-minute scene, a complete cycle of what, sure, a film director goes through in their life, but an empire as well. And this leads me to the second reason why I think this film is about empires / America, perhaps, is that immediately once this dream ends, he's back in his room and he's being cared for by a bunch of doctors, because he's a big time film director, and he can't help but be fatigued, and so they're looking after him. And one of the things that is said almost immediately after the dream is he's got all these, because he's a director, he's got all these photo shots, or these headshots of all these different actresses and women who are potentially in his movie. And one of the doctors says to him, picks up a picture of a woman, goes, she's pretty, American, right? So right away after that first scene, somebody brings up an American reference, which I thought was pretty interesting. The other reference to America that comes not long after that, I think, is when his producer, who looks kind of like a mobster boss, he shows up into a lobby where Guido is, and he gives him a gift, a watch, which to me kind of symbolizes materialism. He's fascinated with these watches. And when he gives him the watch, he says, because Guido's struggling to come up with the confidence or the vision for this new movie. And his producer gives him the watch and says, like, how's that thinking coming? Is it clear now? And Guido says, yes, it's clear. And as the producer's walking away, he says, we've got America right in our hands. So I think that's kind of an interesting little plug there, that you've got a couple of references directly to America, and that this film is about a film director. And now listen, I've seen Story of Film and Odyssey. I don't think that America is the center of all movie history or anything like that. I get that there are different centers for movie histories, and that there are many different cultures that have their own Hollywood, and they're just as important to them as Hollywood is to California or Americans. But I do think it's interesting that this film, even though it could be viewed as, well, Hollywood thinks it's something and maybe we've got America in our hands from an Italian perspective, I think it could also be an interesting thing to note that we are talking movies here. We are talking a movie about a movie maker, and that is kind of Hollywood itself. So to me, there's all kinds of entangled things and potential things to read into. Probably just a kooky little interpretation by yours truly, but I think it's fascinating. Let's get to number 3. All right, so the third reason why I think this could be an interesting reference to Empires or America is that in 1947, Fellini famously disappeared for 48 hours in America. I think it was 1957. There's a Guardian article titled How 48 Hours at Large Turned Fellini into a Maestro, and it's by The Guardian. I don't know if I mentioned that. But Fellini went to America to attend an Academy Awards ceremony, and he famously disappeared. Nobody really knew why or what had happened, but there's a new documentary. I mean, it was new at the time of this Guardian article. I haven't seen it. I think it's called Fellini Black and White, and it's apparently, it has to do, the film says that his disappearance had to do with he just indulged in jazz and surfing and flings and romances, and that this sort of broke him free of his neo-realist style, and eventually propelled him just around the corner. If it's 1957, 8.5 came out in 1963, propelled him to make the great films that made him famous. And so I wonder a little bit if Fellini, that was his first visit to America, if this had an impact on his thinking, not just as a director who's traveling the world, but maybe also as someone who is seeing America for the first time and seeing an empire at its, I don't know when America was at its peak or at the top or whatever, but I think it's possible. There's no way to know this, and this is just my stupid interpretation, but it's possible that could have been an influence on his thinking for this film, for 8.5. Now, I don't want to read too much into this, but I do think it's interesting that all these things happened around that time. So finally, I just want to read you some dialogue. I don't know if this is the actual fourth point or if it's just an interesting point, but there's dialogue that Guido has with his wife, Luisa's best friend. And it starts off talking about Guido and what he wanted to do as a director and as an artist. And to me, the dialogue sort of touched on some of the things that I'm talking about what the other possibilities for what this movie might be about, this film. And it's sort of, as the dialogue goes on, it touches more and more on that burden of responsibility for an empire or someone like a dictator or something like that. So let me just read you that dialogue. Guido, I thought my ideas were so clear. I wanted to make an honest film, no lies whatsoever. I thought I had something so simple to say, something useful to everybody. A film to help bury forever all the dead things we carry around inside. Instead, it's me who lacks the courage to bury anything at all. Now I'm utterly confused, with this tower on my hands. I wonder why things turned out this way. Where did I lose my way? I really have nothing to say, but I want to say it anyway. Well, there's a lot of rhymes going on there. Why don't those spirits of yours come to my aid, Rosella? You always said they had lots of messages for me. Let them get to work. Rosella says, I've already told you, your attitude is all wrong. You're curious in a childish way. You want too many guarantees. Guido, fine, but what do they say? Rosella, the same as always. They're very reasonable. They know you very well. Guido, well then? Rosella, they say you're free, but you have to choose, and you don't have much time. You have to hurry. This has got to be one of my favorite films of all time. And, each time I watch it, I am surprised at how different it is than what I remembered. My memory of 8.5 before I watched it this time was that it was something like Guy Madden, like a Guy Madden film, if you know those. Like The Saddest Music in the World with Mark McKinney and Isabella Rossellini. That it just moves and it's like a lot of quick shots, but it's not like that at all. It's very, very, the pace is very 1963. I love those Italian films from the 1960s, like Michelangelo Antonioni, his film La Ventura, or Fellini's film here. The pace of them is very interesting. This movie is almost a little bit scary if you see it by yourself at night, just because of the sharpness and the coolness of Italians, and like the sort of sometimes the calmness of these actors, and is sort of, it has the opposite effect of calmness on me. Like they're too calm in the face of death. They're too calm in the face of time. But nevertheless, it's a great film. I highly recommend it. Let me know what you think. I know it's a kooky little theory, but everybody says this movie's about being about the life of a film director and the pressures. I think that's what it is, but I think there is room for interpretation that this could be about the life of an empire, whatever that empire might be. Pick your own, and take the word America out and stick British in there, like if you want to, or the Romans, whatever you want to do. But I think there is something to be said about the possibility of this film being about multiple things, not just one. All right, so that's all I have for you this week, my beautiful babies, my beautiful friends. You can follow me everywhere at Culture Fridays on Twitter, at Pop Culture Fridays on Instagram. The site is thisiswhereyouare.com. Send me a note, send me a donation. It's rough times for all of us. And remember, nobody knows what's going on with this virus. It's pretty stupid. Nobody seems to understand what it is still or what's going to happen. Just hold on. We could be in for a longer ride than any of us think, but we've got each other. And what's that line from that song? And if the world runs out of lovers, we'll still have each other. Until next time.